Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show.
All right, Phil, so I like this title that the producers gave us this week. Would you trade $600 a month to protect your spouse? I would hope so.
Yeah. That doesn't seem like a huge disadvantage, but yeah.
Right. So we got this listener question in, so let's talk about this, right? Because oftentimes, we make so many decisions, for retirement, and people I think tend to think, well, it's a decision around the stock market and how much I'm exposed to the market and blah 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 blah. But there's so many decisions that also just are not about that, right? So check this out. So Phil, with my pension, I can get $3,500 a month, but my wife gets nothing when I die.
Okay.
Or I can take $2,900, so a loss of $600. And she'll continue to get it after I'm gone. Which is better? Well, which did she say?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So that brings up an interesting point, though. Yeah, this has to be a joint decision, right? It's something that hopefully you're working with a financial advisor and they can help you put some perspective around this. Yeah, because $600, it's a sizable amount. That's I was going to say a car payment, but not really anymore. But
right. But I think if she had the option of nothing or $2,900 a month, I'm pretty sure she's taking the $2,900.
Yeah,
kind of feels like a no-brainer. But I guess for the sake of the show, let's talk about it, right?
Yeah. No, so there's a lot of factors that play into this.
Okay,
the first is longevity in that risk decision. That's ultimately what we're talking about here, right? So let's say this is the husband. I didn't say if it's male or female, but I would.
Well, he did say when my wife passes.
My wife. Okay. So it's the husband has a pension. So really one of the factors you have to look at is longevity and risk, right? Okay. So, if the spouse, let's say, has some medical concerns, right? And maybe a shorter life expectancy, well, then that is a consideration, because the challenge with taking a survivor benefit, the lower benefit, is that if the spouse passes, the owner of the pension doesn't get an increase. They've locked in that lower benefit.
Okay. All right.
So that is one of the downsides. Now, there are very few pensions out there, used to be more common, that had this step up, they called it, so in that event that if the spouse passed, the owner of the pension, and they took the survivor option like this, a lower benefit, the owner of the pension would get a bump up.
Gotcha.
So they would get that higher benefit. So, but it's not too common anymore.
Gotcha.
Pensions aren't that common anymore for that fact. So
true, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's a consideration if you do have a sickly, spouse or whatever. Yeah.
So you do have to look at that longevity and risk in that decision, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. Another thing you have to look at with this is, is there an opportunity to help hedge if there isn't that step up type pension available?
Okay.
So one discussion we have and kind of run through the numbers a lot of times, depending on the difference, and this isn't a huge difference, so it probably wouldn't work.
Okay.
But if there's a more sizable difference between the single life pension, they call it, the larger number, and then the survivor benefit, it may make sense to take the single life, use that additional amount to buy life insurance, so that in the event that something happens, then there's a life insurance, a death benefit that's paid that the surviving spouse can use to help replace the pension income. The advantage there is it does help that pension owner hedge the event that the spouse passes first. So in that case, if they did take the higher benefit, they bought life insurance, the spouse does end up passing first, they don't need that life insurance anymore because it was intended to help hedge the event that they passed. So they can cancel it and they keep the extra money.
Gotcha.
So they're creating. Sometimes that's referred to as like pension maximization, right? You're trying to get the most out of the pension. So
okay. So yes, it could be an option. Little caveat there to think about, and maybe kind of run the math. And I guess that's. Well, if we kind of we'll skip for a second here and assume just the spousal needs, because everybody's going to, the bills don't change when one person passes. So
yeah, most times it doesn't. There are
a little here. A little
certain
here and
things that
there.
do
Yeah.
change.
Like your amount of food you buy goes down and things of that
Yeah.
nature.
If you've got 2 cars, maybe it's 1 or certain things like that. I mean,
You use less electricity, but it's not like the cable company gives you a discount because there's only one person watching TV.
Right. Yeah. You still have all the base expenses, right? The
taxes on the
utilities
house
don't change,
right.
the taxes, the insurance. Yeah. Yep.
Well, so I guess then thinking about those 2 points that you made as, maybe, the no-brainer seems like, yes, you would take the spousal option so that the spouse has money.
Right.
But maybe to those 2 points that you made, then you need to maybe look more like, well, how does it fit in with the rest of the plan then? Because if that's the case, now you've got these other pieces of strategy that you could say, well, maybe it doesn't make the most sense to take that option. And we look at some of the other things like you just highlighted.
Yeah, and that's really the key in all of this is there's no just off the cuff answer, right? With this person emailing in, I mean, it's not something that we can say, oh yeah, by all means, just take the.
I mean, it feels like it though, benefit. Right?
I mean, most of the time it is, but you have to run the numbers to see.
Yeah. Okay.
To see really how does this all play out? What is the right scenario? If you have sufficient assets that, hey, this pension, it helps for sure. It's a pretty sizable pension as pension goes. But, at the end of the day, if it's not going to really change your picture and you're willing to roll the dice, so to speak, and you think you both have longevity, then maybe it's worth just taking the higher pension. And hey, if worst case scenario happens and the owner of the pension passes, well, yeah, it didn't turn out as well, but it didn't put the surviving spouse at risk.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of the Tax Smart Retiree right now.
So looking at some options to think about when you're considering it as part of the whole plan package here, obviously, what's the Social Security numbers for both people?
Correct.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that's a whole nother discussion that oftentimes we get into with this is that, if they did want to maybe take that higher pension, so they're now going to risk losing benefits to a spouse, in the event that they pass. Well, maybe if they were planning on filing for Social Security early, kind of the offset or the hedge against that is, well, let's delay Social Security. So now we can grow that benefit. So then that helps replace some of what was lost by the pension. So there's all these different factors that plays in. That's why I said there's no right or wrong answer to say, oh yeah, everyone needs to take the survivor benefit. Why wouldn't you?
Right.
I mean, there's many, many factors that you have to consider when you're looking at this overall plan.
Yeah.
And more, specifically that scenario, that client scenario.
Well, let's run through a couple more of those potential options to consider. So Social Security, the strategy around that you just highlighted. Is there another pension there? Is there an annuity in place? Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if they have more than enough income coming in anyways, and again, this gets back to that point of, what happens when that first spouse passes, in this case, a spouse with a pension. So that's a stress test we're always running on a plan. We always try to maximize and make things work best with the assumption both spouses are going to live to full life expectancy. Then we want to run this stress test scenario to say, okay, what happens if, either of you passes today in 5 years and 10 years to really get that picture of, what is that effect on the plan long term? Because we don't know. I mean, none of us know for sure what that day is. So,
Right. So you mentioned the portfolio size, right? So you could have some withdrawal flexibility too, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the advantage in and again, it's not a huge difference, but if you take the lower pension benefit, it doesn't change the need. So if you needed $10,000 a month, you took a $2,900 versus a $3,500, well, you're going to have to take more out of your portfolio to then supplement to make your number, right? The $10,000 a month.
Right.
So that's one consideration. If you're, like I said, if you've got a sizable enough portfolio that from the risk standpoint, if you were to pass early, that it's not going to put the surviving spouse's retirement in jeopardy, then that's a risk decision that you have to make to say, hey, I'm willing to gamble, so to speak.
Yeah.
And take that risk of I do pass early and, my kids don't end up getting as much because, now the surviving spouse is having to spend even more of that portfolio to make it through retirement. So, I mean, there's all these factors have to come into it. It's not just an easy decision to make.
So like okay. So, we covered some pieces there, that certainly getting a little bit more technical, getting some more, running those numbers, getting things kind of laid out. I think for most people, when this is presented, right. So like this email, it's like, look, it's peace of mind versus maximum income, right?
Yeah.
And that's the stark reality for most people. So it's just like, all right, this is the option. And the wife looks and says, well, duh, take the 600, lose the $600 so that I have money coming in. Right.
Right.
And if that's going to make you sleep at night, then is that the end of the conversation?
Right. Absolutely. And that's so in the planning process, I always tell my clients, that's my goal. It's not to say this is what you should do.
Right.
My in the planning process, my goal is to give you the pros and cons. So both sides of that coin, that decision. So when you're making it, it's an informed decision.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, if we run all the math and said, you know what, even if you were to pass early and you took the higher pension benefit, your wife's going to be okay. There's enough there, more than enough there for her to continue retirement. But she's just more comfortable taking that guaranteed known income, then take it. There's not a right or wrong answer. There's your answer. It's an informed decision that you're comfortable with. I often refer to it as the head rule and the tummy rule.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So I can give you the head. I can give you the numbers. That's the head rule. All the math behind it, so you can make an informed decision. But at the end of the day, the tummy rule is the one that governs. Right? If the math says this is the right decision, but it's just not setting well with you, and you're going to be up at night thinking about it, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Take the other decision as long as you know the pros and the cons and you're okay with that. There you go. That's the decision you should make then.
Well, and I think for this person that sent an email in, or anybody in this scenario period, that's the point. Go sit down with a financial professional on whatever the scenario happens to be. This happens just to be the one this week, but get the logic, get the math, and then make a decision. Often people don't do that, Phil. They just are presented with the option and they just, looking at it, yes, I want to make sure that I hate the spousal option, so that's what we're taking.
Right.
And maybe it works out fine, but you may have had a better answer if you at least knew that, all the ins and outs. So I think that's the takeaway, right? Is just go have the conversation.
That is absolutely the takeaway. Because unfortunately, I've run into the scenario where I've got a client currently that when we started working with them, they had both already retired and made their pension election options.
Okay.
They both were school teachers and they both took single life pensions. And I'm like, okay, well, the challenge is and they've got a very nice income right now. Mm-hmm. Well, the challenge is the spouse, the husband, had a little bit higher pension, and he now has cancer. And now there's not a lot of planning that's left to be done because there's no options made. Once you've made that pension election option, you're locked in. You can't go and say, oh, I want to do a mulligan, do it over. And, they don't give you that option. It's done. So it's a final decision. So just make sure you really run the numbers and understand that decision, have the discussion together,
right?
Because what in this case, what the husband's doing, that's going to potentially affect the spouse if he ends up passing early.
Yeah, for sure.
So both go into that eyes wide open, so to speak, know the pros and cons, both sides of that decision.
Yeah.
And as long as you're both comfortable with it, then do it.
Oh, I like how you kind of gave, initially you said, look, a lot of times it probably is the right answer, but there are other avenues to explore before you go ahead and make that permanent decision. So if you need help with that, again, reach out to Phil or reach out to a financial advisor in your area, whatever the case is. Phil helps people all over the country, but still make sure you're having that chat and run that information before you do make that permanent, checkbox, right? So the decision is about deciding what kind of protection matters most to your situation. And of course, Phil's here to help if you need it. Reach out to him. There's links in the show descriptions down below. Hopefully you guys enjoy the content and you get some useful stuff from it, and if you got some questions or thoughts, leave us a comment down below. We always appreciate that stuff and it supports the channel as well. And hit the subscribe button on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or whichever one you like using. Mm-hmm. And that way you catch new episodes when they come out of Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. For Phil, I'm your host, Mark. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Phil? investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.